left your mother.
Pictures? We're not going to see a picture, are we? God, this is the life, isn't it? Mind the door! The train's going now. The train's going. It's moving. We ain't okay. That's all that's out of me!
He was the master at falling over. I mean, he was brilliant at it. I don't know how he did it, and he did it with such style and elan. He would suddenly be standing and then he'd be on the floor.
People think that slapstick is something that is maybe slapdash and just made up and rubbish, but it's not. Norman Wisdom has got it off to a really fine art.
You're gonna give in? You'll get yourself soaked! Now you get soaking wet!
Norman, before I met him, was the most popular film star in this country. I remember going to see a film of his. I got to the cinema and they were lined up right round the block of the whole cinema. There must have been about 500 or 600, maybe even more than that, people lined up 4 deep to see his latest film.
You got my leather.
What have I done?
The fact he's dauntless, that was the wonderful thing about him, that he could, there he was at the bottom of the whole social pile, and he simply didn't recognise this. I'm as good as you lot.
What? Now what?
I left my cap up there. Tuck it down, will you?
Your cap.
Hey, what time in the morning?
I've already told you 7:30 sharp.
Oh. Hey, well, get to sound about 7, eh?
And keep on thinking!
He was the last of the proletarian comedians, really. I think a lot of his comedy comes clearly from a very, very, very difficult childhood. And I think the way Norman personally dealt with the difficulty of his upbringing was through comedy, but the humiliation that he puts himself through on the stage, the routine with the boxing machine and so on, he wrings laughs out of his humiliation, and that comes instinctively but very deeply from his psyche, I'm sure.
My parents were divorced and split up when I was 9 and my dear brother was 11. My father was a chauffeur, and when Mother left home, he was brutal. I can remember being cheeky, a little bit cheeky perhaps sometime, and he picked me up and threw me like that. And I hit the ceiling and then came down in the corner. I hit the ceiling. And then he just walked out and left me there. My mother used to come and see myself and my brother at school, and you know, after school sometimes, just come and see us, about once a month or something like that. But one Christmas day, she bought me a bicycle. It was a fairy cycle. And I went home, I was so delighted, with this, oh, so excited. And my father said, what's that? I said, it's a Fairycycle, Dad. He said, where'd you get that? I said, Mum gave it to me. He grabbed it out of my hand and stomped and stomped and stomped, smashed it to bits. Unkind.
Hey! Hey, stop! Stop, stop! I got your number! JB8 025! I got it! Oh, look! I got your number 2! LHD 045! Hey! I got your number 2! JB8 80805! JB8! JB8!
When I'd left school, he opened the door, came in, just looked at me and said, out. And he opened the door and I went out. And I remember I walked down the steps, just in front of the door, walked down the steps and he slammed the door and I turned around and I said, I'll never see you again, Dad. And I never did.
Blooming shame.
I was then sleeping rough around Victoria Station and all around there anyway. This coffee stall attendant used to push me a hot pie and a cup of bovril every morning about 1:30, 2 o'clock. One night he said to me, why don't you join the army? You get into the band as a boy. Happiest days of my life. Went out on a troop ship to India. Lovely sunshine, my own bed, wonderful food, and football, cricket, swimming. I was in the 10th Royal Hussars, riding horses and learning music, but most important of all, wonderful, wonderful mates.
Our problem with the band, or with the dancers, because I was in charge of the dancers, was that everybody made a dash for the bar during the interval. And I thought it would be rather nice if we could sort of hold the crowds back, just even for a few minutes. I asked each of the bandsmen, 6 or 7 of them, if they would do a little spot for us. When it came to Norman's turn, he said, I can do mimes. I said, oh, well, let's have those.
I had become the flyweight champion of the British Army in India. And I used to do shadow boxing with an imaginary opponent then, you know. And I let the imaginary opponent hit me. And all the blokes used to laugh. They called the entertainment officer in to see me, and the entertainment officer came in one day and watched me doing all that, and he said, Wisdom, that is in the concert party. And I was in the concert party.
I'm going to have a real go here.
When I left the army, war was over, I went to Collins Music Hall in Islington, saw the manager there. He said, what do you want? I said, I'd like to go on the stage. He said, oh, don't be silly. The variety of theatres are closing all over the country. He said, you don't stand a chance. Forget it. But I wouldn't listen to him. I took a room nearby, and I became that man's shadow for 3 weeks. I mean, if he was in the bar and he lifted a pint of beer to his mouth, my arm was under his elbow. Until eventually he said, look, if I let you go on First House on Monday and you're no good, will you promise to go away and leave me alone? And I said, yes, I promise. And I went on First House Monday, and it worked.
Now, don't forget, confidence, deportment, smile at the audience, make an entrance. That's right.
I had a piano on stage, and I got my hand caught in that.
My Uncle Bernie's agency represented Norman through Billy Marsh, who was one of Bernie's partners. Billy had the greatest eye for comic talent of anybody who's ever breathed in this country or breathed show business. He was responsible for the careers of Norman Wisdom, Morecambe and Wise, Harry Worth, Bruce Forsyth. Norman was his first really great discovery, and his association with Norman, his advice, the career moves that he made, moving him from the stage to the cinema and so on, Billy was absolutely instrumental in making the right moves at the right time.
Billy booked me summer season at the Spa Theatre, Scarborough. I was sharing a dressing room with a conjurer, said to me, "Tell you what, Norman," I said, "what's it?" He said, "Well, when I invite somebody to come up from the audience to help me to do a trick, if it's you," he said, "then you come up and we can get some laughs."
Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to take this gentleman's watch and I am going to wrap it in a very ordinary piece of paper. Now then, do you know what I'm going to do with your watch?
No, sir.
I'm going to place it on the table, so. And I'm going to break it up into lots and lots of little pieces. There. Now, I suppose you think your watch is all smashed and broken. Oh, come now.
Oh, get out of it. Go on, get out of it. You know very well it's all smashed up and broken. I saw you and everybody saw you. Put it on the table and you hit it as hard as you could.
Well, that's just where you're wrong. See. There you are. Wrong. Now, I suppose you would like to know where your watch really is.
Oh, yes, please, sir.
Follow me very closely. Now then, whose watch is this, eh?
Norman's?
Yes.
So I said, "How would you like me dressed?" He said, "Well, I don't mind, a bit scruffy perhaps." So I went into town and I bought a little tight-fitting grey suit from a sort of an Oxfam type of shop for 30 shillings and a little cap for 1 shilling. And I went on dressed in that outfit and it became known as the Gump. That conjurer's name was David Nixon. Lovely man. I owe a lot to him. It worked marvellously well. With my meagre savings then, I went off to New York and there was a show there called Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town.
Would you take your seat, please, sir?
Oh, it's all right. I'm getting off for the next stop.
And I found out where Ed Sullivan lived, which was the Delmonica Hotel, Park Avenue in New York. And I went to the Delmonica Hotel and I found out his room number. I went up to his room and Ed Sullivan came out and he just said, "Well, you have an appointment with me?" So I said, "Well, no, I'm a comedian from England and I'd love to get an opportunity to be on your show." And he just looked at me and he said, "What do you do?" I said, "Comedy, falls, singing." He sat on the chair in the corner and he said, "Show me." He stood up after about 3 or 4 minutes and said, "I'm sorry, I don't use that sort of thing on my show." He said, "But I admire your initiative and I wish you a lot of luck." And I said, "Well, I'd just like to thank you for being a gentleman. At least you have seen me." And I left. So, returned. Billy Marsh got me a job in our show at the Empress Hall. After the first night, Lou Grade sent for me and he said, "Saw your show last night." And he said, "I had a friend with me and he would like you to do a show for him." Oh, I said, "Well, that's fine. Yeah, who is it?" And he said, "It's a gentleman called Ed Sullivan from America." Ah, Ed Sullivan. And I remember I said to Lou Grade, I said, "Oh, well, I shall want £2,000. And even Lou Grade said, £2,000? I said, "Yes, I want to take Billy Marsh with me. I've got hotels to pay, my fares out there and all that sort of. It'd cover that." Oh, he said, "Well, I'll let you know." And he called me back the next day and said, "Ed Sullivan's happy to pay you £2,000. So that was it.
I was walking down the street the other day and I saw some man laying in the road with his ear to a manhole cover. So I went over to him. I said, "What are you doing, Dad?" Yeah, he said. I said, "What are you doing down there?" He said, "Here, you listen." So I got down. I was walking down the street the other day and I saw some man laying in the road with his ear to a manhole cover. Oh. I was walking down the street the other day and I saw some man laying in the road with his ear to a manhole cover. With his ear to my suit!
And after the show, I told him that I was the bloke who'd come up and in his hall at the Delmonica Hotel, and he said, "You are, well, Jesus Christ, I can, well, I'll be damned."
Our films really kept Pinewood going for a long time. There was a thing called distributor's gross. It was pretty good if you did 85 to 90. If you topped 100, it was good. 125 was a wow. And the Stitch-in Time did 163. I mean, that's how big he was. We broke records in cinema after cinema. He was a tremendous, tremendous hit. And it's no good people saying you're playing down to the lowest common denominator. That's not true. The sheer quality of clowning went down very well.
You wanted to see me, sir?
Where's that wretched T-boy?
Who wants me? Who did that?
Get out! You're fired!
I used to live in Harrow, and I used to go down to South Harrow Odeon, which is now sadly a supermarket, and for ninepence or fourpence in the afternoon, you'd go down and watch the matinee of Norman's films. And I can hand on heart say, like every other kid in the 50s, I saw every single one of them. He was the British Laurel and Hardy rolled into one. Laurel and Hardy were fantastic, but it was all slapstick. Norman was story, acting and slapstick.
Notebook?
I'm an editor, and I'm sending him out as a new lad to get a story about a function.
Pencil?
This particular scene should be shown in film schools where teaching people about making comedy anyway. This was a perfect example of what film comedy is all about. It's all looks.
Yellow. Got a bicycle?
To see it is funny because it's all one take. A lot of ad-libbing. Not ad-libbing in words, but in movement and expression. And the director allowed us to do it.
David Lowe, he's a dear friend of mine. The times we've laughed together when, Robert Asher has said, "Gentlemen, please, will you stop laughing? This is the 6th time I have shouted cut, and when I say cut out the laughing."
They laid on what was supposed to be a high cliff, which we were climbing, or a mountain, and it was very expensive to do it, and Norman and I kept laughing in this scene. Norman made me laugh, which wasn't difficult. And Hugh took us out in the sunlight at Beaconsfield, out of the particular studio we were in, and said, "Now look here, you two, this is costing me a fortune. Get your act together." And I said to Norman, "I'm expendable. You're not. You're the star." And he said, "All right." And we got back, and we just did it. Don't look down, look up. Stop!
He said, "Go back. 4 steps."
How many?
4.
Very well, Mr. Knowles.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now go!
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes, he did do his own stunts always.
Absolutely right. Everything I did myself.
The only thing, of course, that I wouldn't let him do was in Stitch-in Time, when he was wrapped up in bandages and had to go through a wall and then land on a passing ambulance. I was going to have a stuntman to do that.
The stuntman did into the wheelchair, came down the stairs, right down the stairs, crashed through just as the ambulance was coming through the arch, and he landed on top of the ambulance and slid off the side and broke his arm. And Bob Usher came over to me and he said, "What?" I said, "What terrible shame." I said, "Isn't it a pity? It's awful." He said, "What are we going to do?" And I looked at him like that. And he said, "All right. I wish you luck, Norman." And I did the whole thing. And here we go. That's me right through the crash on top of the ambulance. I did that, believe me. And I put some white string right across the top of the ambulance so that I would grab the strings. Right through the window, slide right across the wooden floor, smash into the wall on the other side. The doctor said to the nurse,
"What's he doing out of bed?"
Some of Norman's best routines are long sequences which build to an absurd situation, and Norman always insisted that every step of the way should be logical and be possible. There's a glorious sequence in Press of Time where the build-up is absolutely logical and every step could happen. Unlikely, but it could happen.
So I decided to bring the bike in. I don't want to get nicked.
Perhaps you'd like to put your bicycle in the kitchen.
And I said to Bob Asher, "I can have this catch on the chandelier." And he said, "Oh no, Norman, that's over the top." I said, "Well, it might be over the top a bit, but not if I'm hanging on, really hanging on to it."
Oh, careful.
Every step separates him from some of the more fantastic performers, say Jerry Lewis, who would not have bothered with the logic so much.
Take it! Take it!
Everybody laughed on the set, and Bob Asher just came over, ruffled my hair sort of thing, and said, "Thank you, Norm. You're right again." Hey,
He would never argue with directors, but he would wheedle it. "Oh, please, oh, go on, let me. I'm sure it'll be..." And he would, "No, Norman, I'm sure it won't work. No, go on, just let me try it." And he never fell out with anybody. I never, ever heard of Norman have a row with anybody. He would just go on, wheedle. "Oh, all right, we'll do it once, and if it works."
If you say so.
there was one particular character I know. It was a German general, and that was a very straight part. Paddy Carstairs knew, it was obvious that he thought that it was going to be a failure, so he just watched from a distance.
What are you doing here dressed up like that, Pitkin? What? It's very ingenious, I must say. You're a credit to the borough.
What did you say? Pig dog?
Nothing. I'm very sorry. Nothing at all.
Ah, so you are making joke.
Paddy Carstairs walked over after he'd shouted, "Cut!" He walked over, just walked up to me and kissed me. On the cheek, I may add, but nevertheless, he was so pleased with it.
It proved that he could do something quite different from what people expected of him. And he was extremely good in it. When he had to sing with Hattie Jakes, Ungeduld, Schubert song, I mean, he looked like a seal having fish thrown at him with his mouth open. But it showed really what more there could be with him.
Excellent! Oh, we must always remember to keep our vowels open. Sing me a note.
Oh, no, I can't sing without Judy, Miss Dobson.
Oh, really, Mr. Truscott?
Oh, don't laugh at me.
Paddy Carstairs in the break said, "Oh, it'd be lovely if we had a song to go in that spot." And I said, "I've got one." he said, "You've got what?" I said, "One that I've written." And, Norman, he said, "You've written half the blooming gags, and don't tell me you write it. No, forget it." And he wouldn't be bothered with that nonsense that I... So I went over to the music room, had a chat with the pianist, and I said, and I showed him the music. I said, "Look, will you put your name on that, please? And then call Paddy Carstairs and tell him that you understand that he's looking for a song for Norman Wisdom. You wondered if this one would do." And he agreed to do that. Anyway, in the afternoon, Paddy Carstairs came to me and said, "Norman, I've got a surprise for you." I said, "What was that?" He said, "I found a song for you." I said, "A song for me, really?" He said, "Hey, come over to the room and listen to it." Oh, it's all right. So I went over to him, and the pianist played the music, sang the lyrics with it, and then Paddy Carstairs looked at me and said, "Well, there you are. How's that for you then, eh?" And I said, "Well," he said, "you're going to bloody sing it."
Don't laugh at me, 'cause I'm a fool. I know it's true, yes, I'm a fool. No one seems to care. I'd give the world to share my life with someone who really loves me.
As a songwriter, he's very clever because he's ignorant. Now that sounds rude, and I don't mean it to be rude. What he has, because he has a limited knowledge of music, he actually comes up with melodies from the heart. And he's a lot of people who write songs who are not trained musicians but can play a few chords either on the guitar or the piano will sit down, play a few chords and try and make a tune around the chords. Norman's totally the opposite. Norman produces a melody. He'll sing a melody, then pick the melody out on the piano. That's how all the great songs are done.
I'll follow a star, but I'm in heaven already. Now I'm going steady with you.
I'll chase you and find you, you can't escape. I know your perfume and I know your shade. Where have you gone? I'm sitting on a volcano with a halo around my head.
He has uninhibited melodies that will come out of him. And there isn't a songwriter alive or dead this century that wouldn't have been proud to write Don't Laugh at Me.
Someday maybe my star will shine on me. Don't laugh at me, 'cause I'm a fool.
I never was a hero in the forces. My gallantry began with my release. For since then I have realized my course is to fight oppression in the days of peace. Now I started with a fuss on a number 7 bus. I gave a fierce conductress tit for tat. She told a poor old dear who got a foot on at the stop, "We're full right up, there's one behind, so come on, mother, hop."
His size was a help in some ways to him, but also perhaps it was his great tragedy, actually, because watching him dance, you realise he was a really good dancer, and he could have been the hero, you know, the sort of the swashbuckling, the dashing hero, but of course he couldn't because he was too small.
We are really captivated with the land. Diva, celebrated, venerated, decorated, elevated hero. We
It's much harder than people imagine to make dancing funny. There's one piece of film that I remember where he's it's an imaginary scene. He's dancing. It's a sort of excuse me waltz, and he's intervening and dancing with somebody, and he uses mime very much in that scene. And what is really skillful about that is you can clearly see who he is. He tells you about his character, but he also tells you about the other guy's character, and the other guy isn't even there. That's really very, very clever. I mean, he either knows how he's doing it or it's simply genius that he can do that.
Doing what I do now, I consider Norman Wisdom to be the finest musical performer this country's ever turned out. His skill as a mime artist, his ability to dance, a completely untrained man, his awareness of comedy is just second to none as far as musical theatre is concerned.
Well, that suits me.
My outstanding memory of Norman was in Walking Happy, which was a stage musical version of Hobson's Choice. The show got very mixed reviews, but his reviews were ecstatic. And what he wrung out of the part, the physical effort he put into dancing, clog dancing on the top of a barrel, for example, brought the house down overnight, and they managed to get, I think, about a year's run out of the show. The show should have closed within the first week, because you're either a hit or you close on Broadway. But Norman's personal performance transformed the show.
It used to be Hobson's Bootmakers, and I come out of the shop, and I look up, and I can't believe it, and I say,
William Muscle, Master Bootmaker.
well, by gum, there's the kind of walk.
You walk when you feel like crowing. There's the kind of walk you walk when you're on your way. There's the kind of walk you walk when your pride is showing. And the kind of walk you walk when today's your day. There's the kind of walk you walk when the world's all rainbow and your heart's hopping like a popping jay. Good fortune's found you, Jeffrey, and your life's a happy Valentine. Oh, when you're walking happy, don't the world seem fine.
There was a strange comment someone made to me in rehearsal a couple of years ago when I had to do some half-formed movements and do them a little bit in an improvisational fashion. And I did them, and my partner said to me, "Please don't do that. I can't stop laughing. You look like Norman Wisdom." So I did remember then that, yes, there was something sort of quirky about Norman Wisdom and his movement. So from that point on, I wasn't surprised to think of him as a dancer.
Problem and world scene.
I remember on opening night, everyone was sweating for the reviews, and we came up in the lift at Sardi's, the door opened and this whole floor, the party, and everybody sort of gave him a standing ovation, a round of applause. And he looked round and he said, well, if the show flops, this is at least I can say I got a standing ovation in the lift at Sardi's. Funny man, Norman.
The Butcher of Broadway, if he belted a show, you know, they'd close the next day almost, it was all that. But with me, he came and saw Walking Happy, and he said, now that we've got Norman Wisdom here, let's keep him and never let him go.
Raymond, am I funny looking? You know, I mean, well, when I leave a room, did a short, funny guy just walk out?
You met a girl. Ah, Chick, my boy, when it comes to girls, you have three qualities that are far worse than being short and funny-looking. You have the curse of the 3 Ds. You are decent, devoted, and dependable. Good qualities in a dog, disastrous in a man. Women like bastards.
No wonder they love you.
And I used to say to him, one day you're going to be in a film where it's not all of you. If John Wayne and Robert Mitchum and Kirk Douglas can share villain, you should, because he was very disciplined and he was brilliant.
From head to toe, I'm a gentleman who wears my top hat and cane. Oh, women go crazy 'cause I'm hard to get. If they don't love me, they ain't met me yet.
In America, it was really beginning to happen for him. But I think for some personal reason or other, he felt he had to come back here, which is possibly a shame, because I think, you know, had he stayed there in the States, I'm sure they would have taken him to their heart, because he's terribly talented and could do everything.
I can tell you the truth now that I was married, of course, over in England, and my wife had found someone tall and good-looking. And so I came back to look after my son and daughter, and I'm very proud and pleased that I did.
И что такое Норман Уиздом, наверное, это то, что я люблю. Это дорога, которую нам проложил, наверное, Дон Кихот. Это, значит, дорога, это трагикомедия, где и слезы, и смех, значит, существуют одновременно. Который, он как ребенок. Наверное, самая его главная черта, это мы в нем видим ребенка. Мы ему прощаем все его промашки, потому что все они произошли не от того, что он хочет сделать плохо, а наоборот, хочет всем помочь, он хочет, чтобы везде было хорошо и так далее. То есть это маленький ребенок, который, раскрыв глаза, это ну, как называется, удивляется этому миру.
Just a few months ago, these children all lived on the streets. Their surprise visitor shared the happiness and warmth of a hostel provided by Child Hope UK. But in Europe's poorest country, these are the lucky ones. Sadly, wherever you walk, it's all too easy to encounter those not so fortunate. A considerable number of young children are being forced onto the streets to beg.
Thank you, Mr. Pitkin. You obviously don't realize, but you've just done something wonderful.
Me?
You must have a gift.
Oh, no, I don't want anything. Me and Mr. Grimsdown, we do it for nothing.
He was then invited to go to Chernobyl, where he received a wonderful accolade from the government, in which they were going to open a hospice for Norman called the Norman Wisdom Hospice. He went along with Patrick Dickinson, who's his old army chub, and instead of flying out there, they decided to go overland, which took them, I think, about 4 days on a bumpety old truck. But Norman said, that's the way I want to do it. And he wanted to be part of the people. He wanted to be one of the lads, which is what he's always like.
Norman went round all the wards tirelessly, day after day, cheering up the parents and the children. And we've got haunting memories of children with dead white faces and no hair. And the matron of the hospital, she was so moved that Norman should come all this way, and she'd seen him on the films and she loved him, that he should do all this for her orphanage, that she was in tears as we came away, and she said, Norman, I simply love you for all you've done for us. And I think that was the first time I'd ever seen Norman really stumped for words.
And this sounds so silly, but I used to just leave over a child of 5 or 6 or 7, then go. And they'd suddenly start to go.
I asked him.
And?
Not too good.
It never is.
What am I going to do?
Complain. Moan like the rest of us.
How long have you got?
I didn't say. But my guess is 6 weeks, maybe 7.
Give me 6. I've got to have longer. Could have more.
Could be 5 weeks, maybe 4.
Why me?
Why any of us?
I've always tried to do the right thing.
That'll end. Soon you'll be so angry that you won't recognize yourself.
No, I'm going to be good.
If you are, I shall be very put out with you.
Oh no, I'm not drawing on my past experiences. No, I'm drawing on the actual story. I am the person who is ill in bed. It's easy.
Can I get you anything?
Pea soup.
No, for the pain, I mean.
Pea soup. Big bowl of it. The biggest you got.
It's 7:30 in the morning.
As thick as possible. The sort you can eat with a fork.
I would have given anything to have played my left foot. I know it was played brilliantly, but I would love... I'm sorry talking like this. Someone might be watching, some director and film producer, and saying, oh, we want him for...
We're going through a period of time, and have done for quite a few years now, where everybody has been really fating Norman, and deservedly so, about his brilliant career of what he's done and what he is. But there is an incredible amount more there. He's a great straight actor. There are lots of plays and lots of things that he could do. He's buzzing to do new things. And at that age, to have somebody who's that fit, I mean, he's quite generally got the body of a 60-year-old man, if not less than that, and a very fit 60-year-old man.
With Norman Wisdom, there is always a surprise. There's always something that you didn't know he could do. I remember watching him on television in the 60s, and I knew him as the man with the little suit. But then all of a sudden he came out and played wonderful clarinet.
Nobody works harder than Norman. He's a perfectionist. When you work with him, you have to do everything on the nose. Every inflection of the voice has to be exactly right. Every turn of the head, moving over to here, has to be 3 paces, and then you stop, and then you look, and then you say the line. So it really is very hard work working with him, because that's the way he wants it, to produce his personality and his feeling for the sketch or whatever you're doing. I mean, so many people have done a wallpapering sketch. But it was the little bits that he put into it that made it such a masterpiece, really. I like to rehearse and I like to know what I'm doing, but I always leave a little bit of looseness in case something happens. But with Norman in a sketch, you daren't ad-lib. The only occasion I can remember is when we did the wallpaper in sketch. We couldn't rehearse with the slosh because it would make such a mess on the stage. And there was one part of it near the end where I had to get the paintbrush and just loop it under the bottom of the bucket so that when I pulled it up, it would all go over his head, which was the finish of the sketch. But of course, the slosh was so much on my hand and it was so slippery, when I went to do that, the brush simply fell out of my hand, and then I thought, oh, it's the end of the sketch, got hold of the bucket and put it over his head with all the slosh.
He would take the most simple things and turn them into high comedy. You find now people search too deep for things that are funny. I don't think Norman ever searched deep for anything. It was always there right before him and he did something with it. And if I were to sum him up in one word, it would be simplicity.
There's a clever boy. There was no limit to what he could do because he would just apply himself and discipline himself until he'd mastered it.
If there's a wrong way to do it, a right way to mess it up, oh, nobody does it like me. If there's a wrong way to do it, a right way to screw it up, oh, nobody does it like me. I've got a big loud mouth, I'm always talking much too free. If you go for common sense, you better stay away from me. If there's a wrong way to break a rule, a right way to be a fool, nobody does it like me. If there's a wrong bell, I ring it, a wrong note, I sing it, nobody does it like me. If there are problems, then I hate them, I don't solve them, I just make them. Oh, nobody does it like me. And if I want to kiss a lady, she agrees to let me try, but when she stands me on a box, oh dear, I feel I want to die.
I did tours all over the world.
Hey, what's your game?
In Tehran, I was just passing a school, and all of a sudden the kids were shouting, "Mr. Norman! Ah, Mr. Norman! Mr. Norman!" Yes. Yeah, and it makes me go, oh my God, am I lucky little devil.
One more little thing. Mr. Grimsdale! Mr. Grimsdale! Mr. Grimsdale!